Morning, welcome to the Farmer and the Florist. Today we're going to take a look at our garden in its current shape, after which we'll go ahead and discuss a few things that you can do to get your garden prepared for next year. Okay, so that brings me to the next part of my discussion, compost. Okay, so compost, what is it? It's made up of a couple of different things, but mainly it's going to be your green compost and your brown compost. So you're going to have carbon-based things like needles, dry hay, straw, anything brown, essentially. That's your carbon base. And then you're going to need your green fertilizer, your green compost, which is going to be things like old plant clippings and stuff like that, old fruits that you weren't able to use, any food trash that you have from inside your house that isn't meat can come right into your compost pile here. And you want a good mix of it, about 50-50. I try and tend to go for 70% of my green fertilizer and 30% carbon. This one here is a bit lacking. I still need to add to it. As you can see, it's still very dry. Still trying to break down. But if we kind of dig in here a bit, maybe I can show you some of the things going on here. Okay, now here's a good example of that. Okay, I'm getting stuff like this stick here, okay? I don't know if you can see that very well, but on that stick here, you've got a lot of white fungus growing, and what that is mycorrhizae, and that's a beneficial bacteria for my soil, and it helps to provide nutrients to the roots, and it helps to establish strong roots as well. It's very good for your plants. Another thing that it's good for is it helps to feed the microbes in your soil and in your compost, which is another added benefit for this. Something else that is a benefit for me is that the chickens seem to love it. They get about 20% of their diet out of this. They pick out, eggshells or old fruits, things that they might like still, that we wouldn't eat. And they do a good job at stirring the pile up, working the material in, and then of course they poop on it, and that gets stirred in with it, but that's just added nitrogen. Now at the end of the year, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll take this pile here and we'll move it off to our garden somewhere and let that sit over winter with the snow on top of it. It will get lightly cultivated in, but the point is to let this stuff saturate over winter and let it slowly leach into the ground, slowly feeding the ground, and hopefully the ground will absorb as much of that as possible. Outside of that, I think that's about all I'm going to cover for today on the compost. Okay, we'll get on to a few other things that you can do in the garden. So now that we covered the compost, another thing you can try doing is cover crops. This will be a great way to add nutrients back to your soil after the plants from this year have kind of drained it. Some of the things we like to plant are wild wheat, wild peas, and we also try to plant wild alfalfa. And all three are really good at adding nitrogen back into the ground. Some of the benefits that we also get from it are for the chickens. They seem to like to feed on it. They'll scratch at the ground, and they'll end up turning that in at the end of the year. But it is a great way to add that back, and the garden seems to really like it. And the last thing I'm going to talk about in this video is planning for your garden next year, which has to be probably one of the most overlooked things for gardeners. A lot of people just don't put a lot of thought and effort into it. They come to the beginning of the spring and realize that there's a lot of things that they thought they were going to get into their garden, don't have the space for, or they have plenty of space and wish they would have gotten more things in. So I really can't stress enough how important planning is. Some of the things you might want to look at are how well your plants did, or how well maybe certain varieties did, while looking at the things that also did bad. Some things might have gotten too much sunlight, too little, too much shade, or too little, too much water, too little water. Paying attention to your fertilizing schedules, things that might have done great this year that you might want to repeat next year would be a great thing to mark down. I use a calendar and I mark everything down on it. So if I fertilized on a Sunday, I'll mark that down, and I know in 3 to 4 weeks later I'm going to fertilize again. Now I may change up that fertilizer type or whatever, but that's not what this is about. This is about planning. You can go ahead and start getting an idea of maybe where you want these plants. Now, pretty much everything I've got right behind me, all these tomatoes and stuff, they're going to get moved to the north end of the field, and I'm going to move all my shortest plants to the south end of the field. And the reason I'm doing that is because during the summer solstice, the sun's right above us, okay? And that's the longest day that we've got, okay? So that's the most sunlight hours. And from there, it just slowly heads to the southern sky. And I would like my plants to continue getting sunlight, because that means more fruit, better fruiting, better production, better ripening, pretty much better everything. So outside of that, maybe get a better watering schedule down if you had things like maybe blossom and rot, which I did have on a couple of these. I don't think any of these are showing signs. Whoops. Anyhow, you just take a look at them and you'll be able to tell. Another thing that I might do for planning is thinking of some of the tools that I might like to have for next year that I didn't have this year, and it can be a great help for you. I know this year I acquired a light cultivator, and I'm going to use that across the garden here to remove some of this rock in the garden. So I'll end up popping the ground here at the end of the year with a broad fork, and then I'll go ahead and take the small tiller cultivator and we'll run it through there and break it all up, and then I'll screen it and get all the rock out, and that'll be the last time I touch that. And from then on, I'm pretty certain I'm going to go with a no-till on this garden. Just seems to benefit the bugs and the insects, the microbes and the bacteria that are in the ground currently, and I really don't want to disturb them any more than I have already. So that about covers that. If you'd like any more information on the compost and how to make that, you can leave me a comment down below. If you have any other questions, you can also leave comments or questions down there, and I'll get to them as quick as I can. Thank you for joining me today, and we'll see you the next time. Thanks. Bye.